Hello treacle tarts, welcome to my bed. You are propped up on a tripod on my bed and I have put all of the things on my bed that I need to sort out, and I want to do a housework ramble while I go through stuff. So I'm not going to be looking at the camera an extraordinary amount because I'm going to be focused, hopefully, on what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. So on my bed I have a collection of things. I've got the rest of my case from Bruges that is not unpacked yet. I need to figure out what's what in my case. I've got odds and sods on here. I've got like medications, I've got some paperwork, I can see some tech stuff. There's a whole big range of things. I've got skincare bits and pieces on there. I've got my hair rollers, they belong in the bathroom. So I'm just going to be categorizing things as I speak. If you've never watched a housework ramble before and you don't know what the suggestion is for housework ramble, usually what I would say is you're welcome to just sit and watch it or just listen to it while you do something else. But if you specifically know that you have some housework that needs to get done, now might be a perfect time. We can do our housework together. So if you've got any paperwork that needs to be done, if you need to do some cleaning, if you need to sew some clothing, anything like that, please go ahead, pause the video now, grab your housework, and we will do our housework together, okay? Okay, so, all right, so I like to be optimistic, honey bunnies. I do like to be optimistic. If I have problems, I like to face them with gratitude. I like to maintain my sense of perspective on whatever it is I'm going through if possible. And I like to recognize my resources as I go along, you know. I don't think any of these things are toxic positivity. I think they are a good way to approach issues and a good way to live your life, okay? I like to pull myself out of darkness when I've been in there too long. Sorry. Got some kitchen foil here. I like to strategize for change. I like to think about tools that I could be using. I like to try to think about where I could have some positive impact on the issue that I'm going through. Again, I don't think any of these are toxic positivity. I don't think it's toxic positivity to recognize that you've been stuck inside an ongoing negative story and you would like to figure out what kind of narrative you could have instead, you know? I think I do all of these things, and I think I encourage others to do those kinds of things when they're ready. So that's not what I'm going to be talking about and possibly ranting about in today's video. This is my box of things that are more intended for the living room and kitchen, so I can sort of move things over. Oh, okay, these are snap poppers for dresses. That goes in my sewing kit. So yeah, all of these things, strategizing, gratitude, perspective, you know, changing the narrative, flipping the script. I don't think any of that is toxically positive, okay? If that was all that I did, if that was the only way that I responded to shitty things happening in my life, then I think that would be toxic positivity. But I like to think that I can find some kind of balance, you know, depending on my situation. I might see that it's not yet time for a positive slant on things. It might not be time necessarily to strategize because I might still need to sit with my raw emotion. I might need to feel my feelings. I might need to unpack that shit, you know. So it might be time to just bawl my eyes out and just be in whatever it is I'm going through. You know, I like to make room for the full spectrum of my emotion. And I like to think that over the course of time, I've gotten better and better at figuring out when it's time for something to change in that regard, and when I've spent too long in a certain mood or in a certain mode of thinking. So I guess the first thing I should do in that case with this housework ramble about toxic positivity is to define what it is that I'm going to be speaking about. And for that, I would like to refer to this piece of paper where I have found two very good definitions of toxic positivity from the internet, okay? So the first one is the Wikipedia entry on toxic positivity, and it gives the definition as this. Toxic positivity happens when people believe that negative thoughts about anything should be avoided. Even in response to events which normally would evoke sadness, such as loss or hardships, positivity is encouraged as a means to cope, but tends to overlook and dismiss true expression. So that's the first definition that I think is pretty good. The second definition I found on the Psychology Group website in an article by Samara Quintero and Jamie Long. And this definition says, toxic positivity is the excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations. The process of toxic positivity results in the denial, minimization, and invalidation of the authentic human emotional experience. In other words, we're kind of shaving and polishing and cutting away the things that seem negative, the sad stuff, the angry stuff, the unresolved crap, the real raw human emotion that is considered to be unpleasant, the stuff that maybe doesn't have an easy solution for it and takes us to be nuanced or to have ongoing investment. That kind of stuff is just taken away. It's just snipped away. And I think that everybody listening to this and watching this now can think of one instance where they've experienced somebody trying to minimize their issues by using toxic positivity. But I am going to give some examples in case anyone is like, the definitions didn't really do it for me. And I want to get into the examples anyway, because that's kind of part of my rant. I think a lot of these brushes need cleaning, to be honest. One of my past housework rambles was actually me cleaning my brushes. So maybe there'll be another one of those upcoming. And I have just found one of the earrings I was missing right in there at the bottom of that part of the container, so that's useful. I'm going to put these down here for washing later. All right, so let me give you some examples of the way toxic positivity can show up when you're talking to someone, when you want to address your problems with someone. First thing is changing the subject. So you say something that you're going through that's difficult, that's sad, that you're angry about, you know, hard news that you've experienced, that you've just received, something difficult that you're having to contend with, and the other person that you've just told changes the subject immediately or very quickly. They basically start talking about something that is joyful, you know, instead of really meeting you where you are with the concern that you've just raised. That would be a really simple example of toxic positivity. Another example would be, you know, when somebody immediately responds to the bad news or the shitty feeling that you're going through by giving you a platitude, a positive statement, you know, that sort of blankets over your feelings. So something like, oh, look on the bright side, you know, stay positive about it, you know, think positively about it. Another one is, well, you've got so much to be grateful for, you know, look at all the things you've got to feel grateful for. Another one is, you'll get over it, you'll heal from it, you know, one day this will all be a distant memory. It's like, well, yeah, but I mean, still, I'm going through it right now. You could have it much worse. That's definitely toxic positivity right out of the gate. It could be much worse, you know. It could be so much worse than it is. That's not a useful reframe right now. If you think of a time, yeah, where you've ever said that you're having a lot of stress at your job and somebody goes, well, at least you have a job, you know. That's a really simple but very grating form of toxic positivity. If you are trying to talk to somebody about your chronic pain or your injury flaring up and they say to you, look at you right now though, sitting with me, having a coffee, walking fine, that's toxic positivity. If you try to say to someone, I'm having big issues with my family right now, I don't know what to do, there's so much drama. If somebody replies to you with, family is the most important thing, just keep them close to you, you know, it's great to have family. Again, it's toxic positivity. They are not meeting you where you are with the problem that you're having. They're not really wanting to hear you. They want to paper over. It's very much a good vibes only kind of agenda. You know, we immediately go to what is the most positive part of the spectrum with this subject, and the person that is performing the toxic positivity wants you to stay there. It is your obligation to stay there, you know? So yeah, there's really no opportunity for you to feel like you've been heard or had any space held for you, and that evidently leads to problems relating to the person that's giving you that toxic positivity, because you do feel diminished, you do feel like your feelings are being invalidated, you do feel like, oh, okay, my duty now is to, you know, immediately go into a different mood, immediately take on a different way of thinking about this, even though that's not where I am, and I'm actually feeling worry or I'm feeling anger, and actually I want that to be addressed and I want that to be appreciated. But when somebody reacts with toxic positivity, when they say, look on the bright side, or like, oh, you know, positive vibes only, or don't think that way, then you kind of feel like you have an obligation to then, I guess, protect their feelings in a sense, or go with their agenda. And their agenda is essentially a minimization of what you are going through, really. One form of toxic positivity that I've come across in my life is when the vibe changes, right? Like two people have tension between them. Me and the other person have some tension. They've said something uncomfortable. They have said something passive aggressive. Like basically something has come up and we clearly don't agree, or there's just some sort of discord. And I want to approach it. I want to say, what do you mean by that? Or can we have a conversation about that? Or, you know, I feel uncomfortable about like the way things have just gone. And the toxic positivity comes when the other person didn't want me to address it. They wanted me to let it go. They wanted me to let their passive aggression or their nasty comment or whatever fly under the radar. They just wanted to say it, but they wanted to be able to carry on with whatever we were doing. And then I become the person who is like inviting drama or being, you know, over the top or being inconvenient by saying, no, the vibes change. Like, we need to address this. We need to talk about what you've just said. We need to talk about what just happened, because it's kind of shit on things a little bit. So we need to, can we address it, please? You know, I find that a really interesting part of toxic positivity. When people want to continue with the night out, or they want to move on with the discussion, or, you know, in the very few cases over the 10 years that I've been doing my job, if there's been discord between myself and a client, if there's been a misunderstanding, if they have not been happy with something I posted on social media, that happened once, but they didn't tell me via email. They waited until we were on a live call to let me know that they're not happy with my political views on something. You know, in that moment, it's really weird when they want me to just continue with the reading instead of fucking refunding them and saying, okay, we need to step away from this now. This is not a comfortable atmosphere in which to do a reading, you know, like we have to make it another time. That kind of thing is toxic positivity. It's like, no, I wanted to make the vibe completely different. I wanted to tell you off, or I wanted to be passive aggressive. I wanted to have a shitty mood. I wanted to throw something around. I wanted to do all of that, but I wanted you to just keep you know, to keep your face on. Like, my intention was for me to be able to act out, but you not to address it. And now you've addressed it, that's a problem for me. Do you have to be so real, Kellyanne? Do you have to be so honest about what has just happened? Can we not just continue with the evening, or continue with the reading, or change the subject? No, we can't. No, we can't. That's toxically positive. That's like, I don't want to pretend, you know? So that kind of thing. I don't know where my jewellery making stuff goes. Where do I put this? I'll leave it there. I'll make a decision in a bit. Yeah, that kind of thing. Again, if you've ever been in this situation where the vibe has gone bad and you want to say, hey, the vibe's gone bad, things have gone weird, something just happened that was like out of whack, and then the other person is like, can we not just move on? You know, like, you're being inconvenient here by addressing the actual truth of what just happened. Toxic positivity, babes, toxic positivity. In the spiritual realm, in the spiritual community, I definitely see some toxic positivity happening from time to time. I want to talk about a few ways in which that presents itself, in my view, in my belief, okay? The first type of toxic positivity that I see in spirituality, to be honest with you, is the kind of language that I would consider to be at risk of turning into victim blaming. Things like, you know, you create your reality, happiness is a choice, stuff like that. Depending upon the situation where that comes up, it can be toxically positive. I think when somebody says it about their own situation, when somebody says, I've decided that my happiness is a choice, I've decided that I create my reality, that can be very empowering. You know, that doesn't necessarily have to be immediately seen as toxic positivity. But I think when somebody approaches somebody else's issues with, your happiness is a choice, you know, you're creating your reality, think better thoughts and you'll get better outcomes, whatever. I think that can be both toxic positivity and also spiritual bypassing. It can be very shaming, and it can also be, in a sense, a profession of superiority. It's like that person that says, you know, you choose your happiness, you create your reality, like you are ultimately in charge of everything that happens to you. That person saying that is actually sometimes sort of implying that they are superior in a way, that they have cracked the code of life and they belong to that upper echelon of people who can actually do that. And then they make the person that has some kind of worry or some kind of pain feel like a lesser class of person. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that go down, and it's not pleasant. I never like it when someone wants to imply that they're sort of like naturally better at the game of life. You know what I mean? It's just simply not true as well. It's not true. And I think it's just a way for people to deal with their fear when they think about all the different things that could happen and all the different pain that they could feel or that other people feel. You know, it's a fearful way of trying not to address that. I also think there's something similar to this that can happen where people take their own spiritual beliefs on stuff and they kind of whack other people over the head with it as a form of toxic positivity. For example, I know that in the spiritual community, some people do believe that they chose their life. So they chose their parents, they chose their life path, they chose the challenges that they would come across. And people express this to me, you know, people that I converse with online, clients of mine, etc. Some of them do believe that, like, they chose their reality before they were born, and they were born into the exact set of circumstances that they knew that they were going to be a match for. And that helps them to really feel like, you know what, I will rise to this challenge because I'm the one that ultimately selected this challenge at the beginning. And I think that can be really empowering for them as individuals if they believe that. And I think that's great. I would never say you shouldn't believe that. The problem is, I don't believe that I chose my reality. That's not part of my paradigm. I just simply don't believe that. And there are a lot of other people who also just don't believe that. And the problem arises when somebody is listening to someone else's problem and they respond by saying, but you chose this reality before you were born. So you know that you're a vibrational match for the issues you're going through, right? That also can be very toxically positive because you're not asking the other person if they believe that. You're telling them that that is the case, and you're telling them that that is the answer. The answer is that whatever pain they're going through is a pain that they pre-selected before birth. Come on, look at the things some people go through. It would be understandable, wouldn't it, if they did not feel that they personally selected that. You know, some of the things people go through. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong if somebody believes that they chose their life path, they chose their parents, they chose their trauma, they chose the challenges. Not saying it's wrong if they believe it. But if you look at the things some people have gone through, and then you look at their unwillingness or their inability to believe that they chose that, you can kind of understand why. You know, there are lots of people in the world that if you turn to them and said, but you chose to live in a war-torn country, you chose for your parents to abandon you, you chose, you know, for the death of this loved one, you know, you selected this in the brochure in the green room before you were born. You can understand why some people who haven't come across that paradigm and don't believe in it would find it very silencing and very minimizing and insulting, actually. So I think that can be an issue too. That desire to paper over somebody's experience by saying, oh yeah, but when I apply my paradigm to it, my paradigm says that you selected this and so it's all fine. Dangerous. Whenever things like racism or ableism, you know, or transphobia or whatever, when they come up in the spiritual community, when different marginalizations come up and the issues that certain people go through because of their differences or because of their life journey, when things like that come up in spirituality, that can be a key time when people go for the hard spiritual bypass, which is also a form of toxic positivity, I think. I relate them, you know, the same. I think they are related to each other, should I say. And, you know, the spiritual bypass is something along the lines of everybody should just learn to live in peace, love and harmony. You know, when someone's talking about racism that they face in this society, to respond with like, you know, we're all the same underneath and we should all just live in peace, and peace is all I want for everybody. It's like, yeah, okay, but we're trying to discuss structural oppression and we're trying to listen to this person's experience of their structural oppression. So like that is an easy way to glide over somebody's story and to refuse to give them the space to tell their story and to really empathize with their story in some way, you know. And it's also more difficult when you bypass like that to figure out what you can do to actually be an active participant in changing it. You know, so I think that's toxic positivity. It's basically like truisms, you know, like it's true that everybody should live in peace and harmony. That's true. It's a truism. Like it's an obvious thing. We all kind of believe that. But when that is your response to somebody talking about their pain and the issues that they go through because of how society is set up, that's when it becomes silencing. It becomes kind of conniving in a way. It's very escapist. And just because you might want to escape from the horrible thing they're telling you is happening to them does not mean that it is correct for you paper over their story like that, and to, you know, go straight to the answer, which is like, obviously that's the answer, but how the fuck do we get there? And are we just going to say that every time horrible things come up? Is that the plan? Because I don't like that plan. I'm not okay with that plan. Another way that toxic positivity arises in spiritual spaces is through like silencing on social media. I remember I used to be really fond of this particular self-development creator online. I'm not going to mention any names, but it was quite a while ago, but I was really interested in their work. And they created a resource, and the resource was considered to have some problematic elements in it. And particularly it was, you know, people of colour within the audience that were kind of like, hey, this is something that we need to talk about. And they tried to discuss it in the Facebook group that this creator had. And the creator had moderators that were evidently told to come along and just delete all of the threads about it, delete all of the comments on it, just get rid of it. So there was like a blanket erasure of the conversation, you know, in favour of just people discussing how they were using the resource and how lovely it was and how much they appreciated it. Like, there was no opportunity for people who had also bought the resource but felt that it fell short to actually say so. There was no opportunity for them to discuss what the issues were. I think that's a dangerous form of toxic positivity. I've definitely noticed in online discourse in the spiritual community and the wellness community and stuff like that, that if somebody wants to bring up something like fat phobia, transphobia, racism, the exclusion or erasure of certain people, just how they feel like something could have been better done, even, you know, some issue that they had with it, I've noticed that there can be a bit of a narrative of, well, we're not here to discuss that, you know? So it's kind of like when somebody brings something up that's from let's say you're having a discussion about issues that affect women, right? And somebody brings something up that is related to them both being a woman, but also being a woman of colour. And then the white feminist, if you don't understand what white feminism is, please look it up. I'm not saying like all white feminists are like this. It's kind of a term that means things. But the white feminist, the person with the white feminist mentality will say, we're here to talk about women. We're not here to talk about race. So the race thing that you're bringing up, that's got no place here. And the feminist of colour is like, it does, because I'm saying that I'm a woman, but I'm also affected by the fact that I'm from this other. And then the white feminist is like, no, we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss women's things. So it's like that feels like toxic positivity as well. Just behold my corn t-shirt for a second. Look how great this is. It's vintage and I love it. Oh yeah. So why does this happen? Why does toxic positivity take place? I want to talk a little bit about that as well, because I've been having all these thoughts like marinating in my brain box. So I think toxic positivity can be something that we do to ourselves. So we don't always have to be doing it to somebody else for it to be classed as toxic positivity. It's also something that we do to ourselves, okay? And when we sort of bypass our own feelings or try to cheer ourselves up quickly without feeling the pain or the anger that we're going through, I think that can be for reasons as well, you know? For some people, it's because they don't feel entitled to the full range of their emotions. Either because they're struggling with low self-esteem and they don't think their experience is important enough to spend time on or to validate in their own brain. For some people, it can be because in their upbringing, they were taught that certain emotions were not okay, or that it was indeed a weakness to show certain emotions. And so they start to actually attack themselves in their own head with toxic positivity before they've even had a chance to get any support from anybody about it. They'll just be like, oh, I'm being, pathetic, or I should move on from this. That's not the way I should think. And they start shaping their reaction in a toxically positive way. Sometimes when someone attacks themselves with toxic positivity, it's because they don't want to go there. You know, whatever they're going through is so scary, and they either don't want to feel the pain of acknowledging it, or they don't actually know if they will be safe if they acknowledge it. And so they start to like paper over it, you know. I think sometimes people aren't ready to accept what it is that they're really angry about, or they're not ready to accept the depth of the emotion that they're experiencing. Sometimes, to be honest, it's because certain people have got this belief that if they think negatively or if they feel negatively, bad things are going to happen. And I have spoken about that in a previous video, my video about connecting with the dark side of human nature. And I have done a quick bites episode, which actually just gives you the breakdown on what I think of the notion that if you think bad things happen. And I will leave that down below if you want to understand more on my perspective. But basically, yeah, some people just say to themselves, oh, if I think that, or if I feel that, more bad things will befall me, so I need to stop immediately. Stop, you know. I think that's toxic positivity that one actually inflicts on oneself. When somebody else actually attacks you with toxic positivity, because it does feel like an attack a lot of the time, it feels confusing, it feels minimizing, and it feels like invalidating, right? So when somebody else comes at you with toxic positivity and tries to get you to change how you're behaving, or to not speak about what you're going through, there can be reasons for that I think are a bit different. First of all, some people go into toxic positivity because they don't know what to say. They just really don't know how to respond to the thing you're saying that is like about your pain, about your troubles, about your confusions, you know. So they immediately go for something like, look on the bright side, or just be grateful for what you have, you know, or oh, something better will come up, or you'll heal, you'll get over it, you know. Because they don't know what actually to say about what you've been through. This happens to a lot of people who've lost somebody, or they've been through something like a miscarriage, which of course also is a loss of somebody, you know, that kind of thing. Or they're about to lose their home because of financial instability or whatever, or they're talking about something terrible that happened in their past, some kind of trauma. The toxic positivity from the other person will sometimes come because they simply have not been trained to know what to say, and they can't think on the spot about what to say. Maybe they feel really fucking awkward about saying the thing they think they should say. They wonder if that will be okay. So instead they go for the lower road that they should never take, which is to impose upon you their toxic positivity, which is never a good thing. Sometimes the person just simply can't manage to empathize with you. You know, they don't understand what you've been through. They've never been through it themselves, but they maybe assume that it can't be that bad. They're not really trying to get where you're coming from and what things are like for you. So that can be a reason why they go for toxic positivity, because they don't really think about the nuances of what it is that you're actually saying that you're experiencing. Honestly, to be fair, some people will go for the toxic positivity route because they actually don't want to invest the time and the energy that it would take to help you for real. That's as honest as it is. Like, sometimes a person will reply to your problem or your experience with a form of toxic positivity, but they wouldn't necessarily do that with somebody else. It's just a feeling of a lack of effort for what you are going through. And that could be because they don't have the energy in that particular moment. It could be because they're really going through something themselves and they just don't have the bandwidth, you know. I'm not justifying toxic positivity. I think it's basically always a bit of a shitty thing. But I definitely think there are certain issues that explain why somebody might go in that direction. Powerlessness is a big reason for toxic positivity, you know. Somebody just really feels so powerless to help you that they would rather paper over the problem, change the subject, try to go for the very, very quick fix, which is no fix at all. You know, toxic positivity is never a fix. But when somebody feels powerlessness, especially if they usually can help, but in this situation they can't help, and it's not really a case of something that can be fixed quickly, sometimes that makes somebody go into toxic positivity because they're like, oh my God, I can't, this is too big. This is like the sun. So we're gonna, you know, you know how I said earlier that when you're toxically positive towards yourself, it can be because you have been trained to believe that negative emotions are a sign of weakness. Well, that can be the same reason that somebody would direct it towards you, is because they feel that your emotions are a sign of weakness and they are trying to encourage you to be strong. You know, the truth is that you are being strong by expressing that something is wrong and that you're worried or you're sad or you're angry or you're fearful. You know, that is actually the strong thing. To be honest about what is not so great is such a strength. But if you've been raised to believe, you know, culturally or parentally or whatever, that it's weak and you don't do it yourself, you're likely to respond that way to somebody else's expression of raw negative emotion. Sometimes you are presented with toxic positivity because the person directing it at you is being fucking selfish, frankly. Maybe they actually do talk about their own issues with you and with others, but when it comes to somebody else asking them to hold space or to be there or whatever, they just simply don't really like it, to be honest. Like, that is straight up the truth. It's unfortunate, but there are some people at certain points in their time on earth who are happy to take the space that's held and to take the support that's given, but they're not that keen on giving it. Like, look, that's not even a judgment, all right? That's just a discernment that I've made over time. Whenever I have expressed my painful truth to someone whom I've previously supported with their painful truths, but when it comes to the response they give in return, it's toxic positivity. And I think, this isn't the way that I dealt with your pain. So why is it now the way you're dealing with my pain, you know? And when that happens, you get to make a decision. You have to make a decision about, will I ever open up to this person again? Has this affected the connection irretrievably? Is this something that I can actually move past and recognize that they just can't help me with this kind of thing? Or is this something that I do not wish to move past because I actually have a standard in my life that I do not actually maintain connections with people that respond that way to me? It depends. Every situation is different. I have definitely had people who are very close to me in my life and who I love dearly respond to me with toxic positivity. It's not an immediate, like, okay, get out, you're not a part of my life anymore. Definitely I've had people respond with toxic positivity, and I'm sure there are times where I've done the same. It's very hard for me to say that because I don't see myself as being a toxically positive person. I see myself as being someone who is not conflict averse, and I'm not honesty averse. And so that's how my ego reads me. But like, look, if I really claim to be the shadow worker that I say I am, I have to admit that I'm sure I've probably exhibited it too and not realised. And people have kept me in their life, you know. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be like, oh my God, somebody presented me with a toxic positive response, they're gone. Like, fuck them. They're not in my life anymore. It doesn't have to be that. But sometimes you do have to make decisions based on that person's response to you. You know how I said earlier that a reason that you might be this way with yourself is because you believe that if you think negative thoughts, bad things will happen? Well, actually, the reason that sometimes people will present toxic positivity towards you is because they believe that if you think bad thoughts, bad things will happen. So they're trying to get you to stop thinking the bad thoughts because of their belief system and the way that they believe that can happen to them. They also believe it can happen to you, right? So there is that to consider as well, that sometimes people just have that fundamental belief that, like, if we address this, if we talk about this, if we go there and we admit this is a thing, we're just going to bring more negative energy, you know? I don't believe that. And if you watch my Quick Bites episode down below, you'll recognise that, like, I very strongly don't believe that. I actually think it's the opposite. I think if you repress something negative and you keep repressing it, that's when it will worsen. But not everybody is that way, you know. Okay, I have actually emptied my case from my trip to Bruges, which is amazing. The only thing left in the case is my foam earplugs that I did not need, but sometimes I do need them when I sleep, like in hotels and stuff. So I'm just going to give my case a little clean. And that has been a big weight off my mind because I don't like it when a case is just sitting there with things in it, you know. I think that it's good to unpack straight away, but I didn't have the mental or physical energy to be able to do that when I got back. So it's a few days after my return as I'm filming this. And yeah, it's finally all empty, so that's great. Still got a few more things on the bed that I need to clear off, but I'm sure that I won't have any issue doing that. Okay, so I guess next thing I want to talk about that's been on my brain, it's been on my cranium, darlings, is how do you deal with toxic positivity when it presents itself? When you say something to someone and they respond with something that is evidently toxic positivity, what the fuck do you do? How do you deal with that? I mean, the way that I think of it is like this. Do they have a habit of it? Do they have a pattern of it? Is it something they've exhibited to me before? Because if it is, then I can do one of two things. I can address it with them. You know, I might not necessarily address every time they've ever done it, but I might feel like, okay, now's the time to address it in this situation. Or I can say to myself, this person is not a trusted confidant in my life. I like them. I may even love them, but they're not someone I should go to with my problems. And they've made that clear, you know, so I should take that evidence and I should act accordingly. I should change the way I interact with them accordingly. They might be great for a night out, but not necessarily great for, you know, problems, talking about problems and stuff. So I think about whether or not it's a pattern, because sometimes a person will actually usually respond to your issues in a really like helpful way, and they'll be very attentive, they'll be very open to talking about it, but they might exhibit toxic positivity just in a certain situation, right? That's the case, that sometimes it's like just that one thing. It might be that one moment where they feel they can't be of service. They might say it absent-mindedly because they're tired or they've got too much else on the brain. They might be thinking about how they would respond to it. You know, there might be a number of reasons. They might be scared of just that one particular subject. I've definitely experienced some fucking toxic positivity when it comes to my bereavement journey, and I assume that it is because people are fucking terrified of what I'm going through and do not want to imagine that it would ever happen to them. In fact, there is definitely some evidence that I have collected together that strongly suggests that some of the people that have been toxically positive towards me about my brother's death are people that are very, very close to one of their siblings or more of their siblings. And so they fear it. They fear what I'm going through. They don't want to look it in the face. So, you know, it might be a little easier for me to let it go if I recognise that. And I think to myself, okay, well, they're just not good in this situation. It wasn't meant as a slight on me. Maybe it's not something I need to bring up with them, but it's something I need to bring up with me about my relationship with them. You see what I'm saying? If somebody can't be relied upon when the chips are down because they never have presented themselves as a safe haven for you, though, then, you know, yeah, it might be time to feel that you can make a decision on that. And you can, you're allowed. You are allowed to throw someone out of your life, by the way, if they only ever respond to your issues with toxic positivity. You can discern that it's not healthy to keep them in your life. You're allowed to do that. You don't have to think of it as this terrible moral judgment on them. It can literally just be a discernment, and that's all. That's it, and that's all. One thing that I try and keep in mind is that, and this is something I've said on the channel quite a few times in the past, some people do provide a certain type of support, and that is based on their personality type and their experiences in life and stuff. And when they offer that type of support and it's not the right type of support for you, it doesn't mean that they are presenting toxic positivity. It just means that they are responding to things very much from their own personality, like their own ability to relate to it. Like, I'll give you an example, okay? One of my closest friends in the world is very much like, the way that they help is in a very sort of problem solving, strategy developing, what's the next right action type of way, right? And anyone who's familiar with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, this friend that I'm talking about, they are an ISTJ, which is basically like the personality equivalent of being Spock from Star Trek. They're just very logical. They don't really see the use in too much display of emotion or in sort of steeping in the emotion. Now, in the Myers-Briggs type indicator, I am an ENTP, which means that I very much see the point in going around the houses with my emotion. I want to discuss my emotions and analyse my emotions from various different perspectives several fucking times over. And to me, that's very useful, very helpful. But to them, that's like the amuse-bouche before we get to like the main fucking course, right? It drives them crackers. They can't do that. Now, they've learned to do that a bit better over the course of time because they've come to understand that I need that. And when I'm the one in distress, that's what I need, right? That's what I appreciate. But it doesn't come naturally to them. It's not the type of person they naturally are. They are more of a kind of like, how do we fix this? What's the plan? And to me, that's not helpful, right? So I don't think they're being toxically positive when they approach my issue like that. But over the course of time, I've recognised that they're not necessarily the person I would go to when I really need to just talk something out, vomit something out. I have other friends who are better at that bit. So I would also say that too. When you come up against a situation and you think, oh, why is this person throwing this at me? Like, why would they do this in this moment? Try to think to yourself, are they actually the type of person that just offers support in a way that is different to the type of support that I need right now? You know what I mean? Because I think sometimes it's very possible that sometimes we can have some false friends when it comes to toxic positivity, and we can say to ourselves that something is indeed that when it might not be that. It might be that that's just the way that they help. They want to you know, help you to figure out a plan, when actually it might not be something that's that easily fixable. And that might be harder for them to understand just by virtue of who they are and how they walk around in the world, how they operate. Some of you might disagree on that, and that's fine. You know, but like, there's always room to figure out, isn't there? Sorry, I've got loads of money on the bed. There is always room to say to yourself, is this actually what I think it is? Or is this person helping in the best way that they know how? And actually, at another point in my situation, it will be helpful, but it's not helpful right now. So maybe I'll come back to them when I'm a little bit more strategy oriented, you know? Because I think in my list of examples of toxic positivity at the beginning of this video, at no point did I mention that like they want to get straight to the answer. It's like, no, that is a form of help in a way, but sometimes that's not always what you need straight away. You need to be able to like, you know, steep in your feelings, right? This is my purse. I describe it as unicorn hide. Which is horrible because I would never skin a unicorn. But if I did skin a unicorn, I can imagine that this is what it would look like. This kind of like iridescent vibe, this holographic iridescent vibe. Love that purse. If you want to bring up with somebody that the way they've dealt with your problem is not helpful, you can say, you know, that's not helpful. You can do the compliment sandwich. We've always got room for a compliment sandwich where you can say, I really appreciate you hearing me and giving me your honest response. Then move to the meat in the sandwich. The meat in the sandwich is that kind of response is not helpful to me right now because I can't just switch to that way of thinking, you know. So at the moment, that is just not a helpful thing that is going to give me any nourishment, you know. Then we go to the bread, okay, the compliment at the end. You get it as a sandwich. And the compliment at the end will be, you know, I want to say that I appreciate you being there for me and listening to me. You know, maybe I'll come back to you at another point when I feel differently. But right now, I just, you know, I can't just switch things on and off that way. It's not how I'm feeling. It's not where I am. I need someone to hear me. You know, so you kind of say thank you, and you kind of say, I'm not going to discount you as a friend in the future. But the middle bit is like, that's not helpful right now. I cannot just switch myself to looking at the butterflies and thinking, oh, how lovely. I can't just switch myself to peace and love and good vibes, you know. I can't do that right now, sorry. You can say, I'm not ready to think that way. You can say, I feel like we need to start the conversation over because I'm not going to feel comfortable that you've really heard me until maybe you hear me again and you understand why your response doesn't make sense right now, you know. It depends on the situation. It depends on the person. It depends how close you are. It depends how much you want to trust them to honour that kind of response without making it all about them. You can also say, I don't think I can do that right now. Do you have any other advice? Give them a second chance. Let them, you know, shoot for it again. If they say, oh, just think this way, you might want to just go, I can't right now. I've tried and I can't. Is there anything else you'd advise? Do you have any other perspectives? Puts them on the spot a little bit, but maybe that's what they need. Don't forget to look up advice online. You know, if you feel like you didn't really get what you needed from that person, then don't forget that there are people out there who've written incredibly informative 10-step blog posts, or they've done amazingly in-depth, honest vlogs, or whatever it might be. There's so many free resources about there about pretty much every problem that you have. You know, that is the beauty of the internet. God, I can barely believe that like I spent a chunk of my life without it. I can barely believe that there was some time in my life where I didn't know what the internet was and I didn't have it and it wasn't a thing. That's wild, you know. But now we have advice at our fingertips. We have support at our fingertips. We can join forums and groups and discords and, you know, we can do all of that. If you have been toxically positive towards yourself, apologise to yourself. If you've been toxically positive towards others, apologise to them. Just say, hey, a few weeks ago when you brought up that thing, I realised that I actually papered over it by just trying to tell you that you should feel differently. And actually, like, if you would give me another shot at hearing the problem, if you still want to, I'd like to do better. God, it feels good. I don't even need to say that to anyone right now, but it feels good to just say it and realise that it is a possibility to be that frank and that honest and willing to shift and willing to try again, willing to do better. Make the commitment to doing better. If you know that you do direct this stuff either at yourself or at someone else, yeah, make the commitment to do better. I think I'm going to use my Bruges map in a collage. I loved my Bruges trip so much that I think this is going in my art materials pile. Yes, that'll be lovely. It's been a while since I've used a map in a collage, but I think it's a good idea. If you know that you respond in a toxic positive way because you don't know what to say when certain things come up, honestly, I know it sounds really weird, but try stock answers. Write down some stock answers. Some people really need that shit, you know? Some people that have anxiety, some people with different experiences of neurodivergence, you know, like they honestly just need to have a list of things that it's appropriate to say, that it's helpful to say, and that open up a wider conversation. Because if they're put on the spot by some information and it's very harrowing or it's very complicated, they might just immediately go into like, oh, just be happy, oh, you know, and they don't mean it. They're not trying to be horrible. It just might be for them what comes immediately to mind. So don't be afraid to say, do you know what? I don't have a perfect track record with this. I need some answers that I would give if somebody comes out with a problem and there isn't an easy solution, because I don't want to throw that at them. I want to be better, but I need to actually remember some things I can say, you know, that's fine. I think that's very loving to do that. Okay, my bed is nearly clear, which is awesome. I'm very pleased with myself. I hope you got some housework done as well, darlings. Please let me know down below what you did. And I guess the last thing that I want to say is don't be afraid, you know, to state your limitations and to state your boundaries. If somebody keeps coming to you with the same issue, and you feel like you want to be better at responding better to them, but you kind of feel at this point like they're pushing you into toxic positivity because you've given them every other thing you can give them and they're not using any of it, you know? They're kind of like an arsehole. My stepdad reminded me of, my mum's husband reminded me of that word the other day, arsehole, where somebody just keeps coming to you and they want advice and they want you to space hold and they want to complain, and that but it's been the same issue forever and ever and ever and ever, and they never take any of the advice. They never go with anything that you say. They don't do anything differently per se, and you've kind of reached your limit with how much more you can hear about it, you know. Don't be afraid to say, like I did it recently with someone who's had the same issue for like 15 years. But look, some issues take a long time, okay, but I'm fresh out of fucking ideas. So I was like, look, I'll do you a reading on this. I think that might be the best thing because I can't think of anything else to fucking say. But then after that, I'd like to put it to bed with you because I don't have anything else I can't say anything more. You know how I feel, and it's actually getting me and my feelings to know that you're still going through it, and it's stressing me out. I'm upset because you and this person that you're conflicted with haven't managed to deal with it, and it's kind of irritating me and it's affecting me. So I've given you everything I can give you. I've been saying the same thing for a really long time now, and I think we should wrap it up with some cards, you know, and see what spirit has to say, because I'm fresh out of knowing how you can get out of this bind, right? To me, that was me instating a boundary very strongly. And just kind of like knowing that that's okay to do that, you know. I'd rather do that and be honest than to slip into toxic positivity. I don't think that's a good avenue for anyone. And if your boundary is pretty much always that you can't help someone that's going through hard things, examine that, you know. If your boundary is always that when something is difficult, you're not the person ever for anyone, then yeah, examine that. I highly doubt many people that have gotten to this point in this kind of video would be in that kind of situation. But just in case anybody has got this far and they're the type of person to be like, that's my boundary, can't help with hard stuff, can't help with anything difficult, then what are we doing here? What are we fucking doing here? What are relationships about? What are relationships for? What does it really mean to accept reality, baby cakes? All right, my loves, this was my housework ramble. I very much appreciate you being here for it. Very, very much. And yeah, stay safe and stay sane, and keep it fizzy and keep it rebellious. Much love, darlings. Blessed be.